find it strange? Only thing we have is a last name. Ooh, oh, don't you find it strange? Only thing we share is our last name. Wow, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of, Analysis with Ro. We get into it. We dive deep into all kinds of stories. And in particular, we're still on, the topics of like Illumian, the Zoldyck family, as well as just Hunter x Hunter in general. Let's get into this particular episode, which is going to be discussing kind of like the types of dysfunction within the Zoldyck family. And I know this has been a long time coming. Again, this is kind of just re-spouting out information that I've talked about before, but it's been deleted. So this is just kind of doing that kind of thing all over again. Let's get right into it. So before we get into the type of dysfunction that the Zoldyck family is particular in, we got to discuss what even the hell is a dysfunctional family, right? When you hear dysfunction, you hear chaotic. You hear, oh, it's a mess and a half. And it's true. But we're going to break down the specifics of what it is. So let's do that. So a dysfunctional family is one in which there are impairments, disturbances, or deficiencies in behavior, right? So you have like normal family patterns. And again, there's no such thing as a perfect family, but there's a difference between maybe a bit of issues within a normal family, but they tend to get resolved quicker. There's kind of this sense of, again, interdependence within a family relationship and those kind of family bonds. And then you have an unhealthy family. You have the dysfunctional family, which does not follow those normal patterns that, a functional family would have. And again, there's all kinds of like issues that people may have. Again, life's not perfect. Things get in the way. But you have, life's not perfect, things get in the way, but, essentially our family is still fine. And then there's, severe impairments such as maybe an addiction of some sort. Maybe you have a family member that is abusive, neglectful. Those are the types of families that would more so fit under the classification of dysfunctional. So this may manifest as poor communication, again, physical or emotional abuse, ongoing conflict, or other issues that are prevalent in the family and prevents the development of healthy relationships. So essentially, you have a family that even though they have some issues, life's going to turn its way, they essentially still have a healthy relationship with one another. And then you have families that have unhealthy relationships with one another, right? Because you're in a family system, you are with all kinds of people in a group. And if that group doesn't know how to agree with each other, then it's a chaotic, dysfunctional group. So for the Zoldicks, we have a mixture of kind of all of these issues combined that I've discussed above, like the physical and emotional abuse, as well as emotional neglect, not necessarily physical neglect per se, but definitely emotional neglect that seems to, contribute to this family. It seems like one of the main issues is intergenerational trauma as the primary cause for their kind of dysfunction, as the current Zoldyck generation wasn't necessarily first to live in such conditions. So again, this has been a cycle within their family kind of for a long time. So things like enmeshment, the things like the emotional and physical abuse, it's been going on for like years before the recent kids that we are seeing have even been born. So yeah, although these issues have existed for a long time, and although these kids probably have it quote unquote easier, I don't like saying that in particular because each generation has their issues, but hey, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, technically, if we want to be technical, they might have had, like, I don't want to say easy treatment, but I'm sure in the previous generations, it probably was worse. Just a little bit. So, like, due to increased resources and stuff like that, you got, like, the age of technology and all this other stuff that makes these recent kids' lives easier versus like the generations before them. So obviously the previous generations, they didn't have those increased resources that recent generations have now. So they did kind of live a more so difficult life because they didn't have those resources. This does not erase the unresolved trauma caused by like the generational curses that are passed down from like parent to child. So like even with those increased resources, it still did not stop the dysfunction. Like it's still currently a mess of a family, to put it simply. So, however, there are other issues as well, including the parents of Illumi and the other Zoldyck siblings. So not just like intergenerational trauma, which is the first problem. There's additional issues as well, right? And I talked about how like sometimes, there's different types of dysfunction. And in this case, we're going to talk about dysfunction when it comes to intergenerational trauma, as well as dysfunction within parents who are afflicted by, and please don't take this the wrong way, but they're, unhealed. Let me just say that. Unhealed, unresolved, untreated mental illness. It can affect a family in a negative way. It absolutely can. And again, this isn't meant to demonize people with mental illnesses. It's kind of just talking about like the negative effects of it, because there's positives and negatives to everything in life. And in this case, when you are a parent with unresolved mental health issues, then there's going to be some serious issues for your family. So yeah, this combined with their dangerous lifestyle of course, being assassins, that kind of thing. So I like to think of this in a way. The best way that I can describe it is you have like this strict family, which have elements of a fundamentalist family. And for those of you that don't know what a fundamentalist family, it is an extremely strict religious family. There's a couple of YouTubers like Fundy something. I don't exactly remember her name, but she's great when it comes to discussing this topic of fundamentalist families. Honestly, if you just look up the topic of fundamentalist families, you'll find her channel. She does a great job when talking about it. So you have elements from that kind of family. You have elements of not just that kind of particular family, but also elements of like the influencer family, right? Which they would use their kids for like work, essentially kind of just like exploiting their children for profit. You do have those elements as well. So you talk about like all the kinds of issues with influencer children. The only like vast difference is they're not exploiting their children's image, kind of the opposite. They're kind of hiding their kids away, but they are exploiting their children for work in other ways that, can somewhat be compared to that of an influencer family or a celebrity family at that. I discussed in here particularly comparing this family to like the Barrymores, for example. So that might give you a good image for this particular type of family that we are dealing with. But anyways, yeah, combined with like the dangerous lifestyle of working within the criminal market, which obviously it's not the go-to when it comes to parenting either. You got that. So it's a breeding ground for like all kinds of bad ideas, right? I mean, it might bring the money in, but at what cost, right? This family appears to have, as I like to call it, sold their soul. And again, it's just the saying. It doesn't mean literally selling your soul. It's basically selling yourself out. Kind of doing these things that give you, in a way, cognitive dissonance. Yeah. They're doing all of that for money, as opposed to seeing wealth as an additional resource that in the end is not really worth dying for. Because when you look at this particular family, it's just like thinking from it from a logical perspective, right? There's really no need for them to continue as assassins, right? Like, maybe there's a good reason why their family started off that way. And I kind of had my theories about it, which I might discuss later on. But do they need it currently? Technically, no. They could honestly save up or figure out something else to invest their money in so that their kids honestly just don't have to do this anymore. But for whatever reason, because for so long it's been ingrained for them to survive in this way, This is just all that they're essentially used to. So even when you look at it from a logical perspective, it's just kind of like, it's not really necessary to kind of do these things anymore. Like, you guys literally have the resources to do something else. But, you know, it is what it is. I mean, hopefully not in the later episodes when we explore this family again, and I hope we do. It's like, hopefully it's not going to be, it is what it is. I hope it gets resolved somehow, but for now, let's just, you know, leave it there. So yeah, as opposed to seeing wealth as an additional resource, that in the end is just not really worth dying for. So they are not only homicidal people with contracted agreements, but it also seems to sign any of the younger generation's choices away. So like I've said before, it just seems like you're an assassin. This is all our family could be, and this kind of thing. When you look at it realistically, no, it's not. Matter of fact, you guys have the wealth to literally just be like, maybe not everybody in our generation needs to be assassins, you know. Maybe if our kids choose to do something else, as long as there's some kind of profit behind it and we can invest into it, right? There's just a better way to go about it. But hey, we're going to discuss that intergenerational trauma in a couple of episodes later to kind of just dive deep into this mentality, because it is something hard to break, to be honest, to be fair. But yeah, it kind of just takes away the choices of the younger generation, because it's like, there's a high chance that your kids are going to become their own individuals, right? You have these kids that are going to grow up to be something different. And this also dives into the topic of enmeshment. So you have these enmeshed families that are essentially like, there's only one way to live life, and everybody in this family has to live that one way because it's the best way for a family to survive. But realistically, that's not really going to happen, because people grow up, people have their own thoughts and ideas. And with this younger generation in particular, I mean, obviously with their, you know, brainwashing tactics that they used for their children, if they didn't do that, and you have like some of the younger kids, honestly, it didn't really work, because one way and the other, most of these kids have rebelled. But hey, that's another discussion for another day. The point is, they don't really give their kids that much of a choice, right? The younger generation, much of a choice. It's all for money. You know, instead of allowing money to serve them as a tool, they've essentially allowed money to control them and succumb to the vice of greed. To be honest, yeah, that is essentially what's going down and what's happening when it comes to this particular family. And of course, there's more things to discuss, but that really is the simple summary of it all. So, you know, along with this, you also have roles for each family member of a dysfunctional family. So that it appears that they're not falling apart at the seams, and you want to make your family look perfect on the outside, right? For a dysfunctional family. You don't want everybody else to know of your problems. So because of that, they have set up roles for each family member to play so that it looks perfect. See, again, the difference between that of a quote-unquote functional family, or a healthy family, I should say, is that a healthy family, you're going to have, you know, different functions and different things to do from time to time, but it's never really a specific role. You have the freedom to be more diverse as a human being, right? Versus in a dysfunctional family, you kind of have this role and you're kind of just stuck there. Think of it as an actor who has been typecasted. And for those of you who tend to follow like actors' interviews and stuff, you can tell like being typecasted would annoy an actor, because it's like, I need, you know, more range in my roles. I need to show that I can do different things. I'm not just this one thing for the rest of my life. Like, that's just not possible. You can't really fit humans in a box. But for a dysfunctional family, that's just kind of what they do, so that nobody else can know of the dysfunction. Again, it's all to fit the illusion of perfection. That's why the boxes are there. It's supposed to be an illusion. Nobody else outside of the family, mind you, knows of these boxes, but everybody in the family knows of these roles, right, that are placed. So again, your family looks perfect, but really it's cracking from the inside. And if there's any kind of family who knows that first and foremost, it's gonna be the Zoldyck family. So let's examine now what these different types of roles are, and I'll see you guys in a minute. We'll be right back. Hello everybody, and welcome back to this episode. And right now we are going to be discussing the different family roles for the Zoldicks. Before we discuss anything else, let's go over the basic facts of the type of family that we're dealing with. We are dealing with a family that has a narcissistic family model. And before we get, into the different types of roles, let's just figure out what a malignant narcissist even is. Right? It's like, what's a malignant narcissist, and how is it essentially affecting this family in particular? So, a malignant narcissist, to put it simply, is an abusive person who finds pleasure in lying, manipulating, and using others in order to get the things that they want. Narcissism is a personality trait recognized throughout history, but the awareness of NPD, or narcissistic personality disorder, and narcissistic personality in, popular culture has just grown in particular. So we are more aware of what NPD is, how it affects people. It's been more so talked about. Sometimes it's talked about inappropriately, because sometimes people tend to overuse the term narcissism, and you're not actually dealing with the narcissist. You're just dealing with a person that you don't like. Not everybody in your life is a narcissist or has strong narcissistic tendencies. But there are some people like that, and we are clearly seeing a character who has that kind of thing. We'll talk about who the narcissist is. It really shouldn't be a surprise to you once we reveal who it is in this particular family. But yeah, as a result of all this, you are essentially trying to figure out the different types. So we have all kinds of types of malignant narcissism. We have overt narcissism. We have covert narcissism. We have communal narcissism, antagonistic narcissism, and we have malignant. And malignant is the most severe type, and unfortunately, that's the one that this family in particular is dealing with. So there's that. So, what even is a malignant narcissist? Well, beyond the desire to focus primarily on themselves and be held in high regard by virtually everybody else in their life, we have people with malignant narcissism. They tend to have a darker side to their self-absorption. These individuals can be highly manipulative, and they do not care who they hurt as long as they get their own way. And although there's one official diagnosis for narcissism, it can manifest in different ways for different people. And there is, for example, grandiose narcissism, while some people have vulnerable narcissism. Again, because it is a mental disorder, it is on a spectrum. So malignant is kind of the worst form of grandiose narcissism. That's essentially what it is. So it is considered the most harmful type. It is the quote-unquote quintessential of evil, which if you have a person like that within your family, I mean, goodness gracious. This isn't, again, to disparage anybody with, mental health disorders. I get it. It's hard. It's tough. I'm not the most mentally sane of people either. Hey, that's neither here nor there. The point is, there are some people who kind of have, the worser forms of that. And especially if you have, extremely severe NPD, it can truly negatively affect people. And that's just more so what I'm discussing, right? The negative effects of severe NPD. That's essentially what we're dealing with. So we have, and again, once I reveal who this particular person is that has the NPD and how it affects everybody else in the family, it's not going to be a surprise to you. So there's some signs to look out for, which is preoccupied with fantasies about beauty, brilliance, success, and power. They are unable to handle criticism. They have a tendency to lash out if they feel slighted. They likely take advantage of others to get what they want. They are over-concerned about their appearance. They have an expectation to be treated as a superior. They lack empathy for others. Their inflated self-sense and inability to self-regulate. They have no remorse for hurting others and no interest in apologizing unless it benefits them. They have an attitude of deserving the best of everything. They have a tendency to monopolize conversations and or mistreat those who they perceive as inferior. Hidden insecurity and a weak sense of self, and they also have the tendency to blame others for their own behavior. There are also some additional signs, which is seeing the world in black and white terms, including seeing others as either a friend or a foe. Seeking to win at all costs, leaving a great amount of pain, frustration, even heartache in their wake, not caring about the pain they cause others, or maybe even enjoying it and experiencing it as empowering, doing what it takes to protect themselves from loss, inconvenience, or failing to get what they want in any situation. Now, who is this malignant narcissist that I'm even talking about? This all sounds terrible. Well, the reason why I said this may not be surprising to you unless you haven't been paying attention is the first role that we're going to talk about is known as the controller, right? The main person that everybody else is kind of just revolving around. They are the quote-unquote sun, right? And everybody revolves around them. The world revolves around this person, or at least they like to believe so. Who is this person in particular that I am discussing? And why in such a way? Silva Zoldyck. Oh, this man. The family patriarch. Nobody talks about him in this way, but I'm going to because I need y'all to know the motherfucking truth, right? I need y'all to know the truth. The bread and the butter when it comes to this man. So, Silva Zoldyck. That's our malignant narcissist, right? That right up here is going to be kind of the main cause for the dysfunction in a way. He's not the complete cause because, like I said before, it's mixed with this as well as like intergenerational trauma. So there's a lot of things that aren't his fault, but there's a whole lot of things that are his fault. Let's talk about it. If it's not his favoritism towards Killua kind of being one of the issues that, of course, we see throughout the series, of, Killua being a golden child, which over time, the golden child gets sick of it, right? And starts to see how being the golden child is kind of isolating. We'll talk about it. If it's not his favoritism towards Killua, it is everybody trying to appease Silva, right? Because people who have any kind of narcissism, they have this need for filling up their narcissistic supply, right? Filling up this need for like attention, to feel like they are superior, to kind of fill in the sense of insecurity that they have. But the thing is, because that insecurity is malignant, it's not gonna go away, and nothing is truly helping, especially if you are kind of enabling that narcissistic behavior. As a matter of fact, it's making it worse. But that's neither here nor there. Again, because of the malignant narcissism that we're dealing with, he seems to think the world revolves around him and his needs. I mean, never mind what the other family members want in their life. He doesn't care about that, as we discussed, right? That they would kind of just talk over others and kind of be like, your life is not as important as mine. Everybody's lives have to revolve around me. So yeah, never mind what the other family members might have wanted. He doesn't care. If he can't control a family member, he either obsesses over gaining control over them, though not as openly as Kikyo. What I mean by that is because of the tendency to manipulate, it doesn't appear, right, as open as like Kikyo. Kikyo is like all the feelings are out there. We'll kind of discuss her in a deeper way soon as well. But all her feelings are out there. She's seen as the quote-unquote more emotional type of person. within this particular family. In a way, those emotions tend to be weaponized against her as well, but we'll talk about that later. Or just abandons them completely, right? So if it's not gaining control, it's abandoning the family that he deems as like unworthy or doesn't fit into his perfect subscription of how an assassin is supposed to be. So Alika being the perfect example of that, with her being the scapegoat. She is essentially the abandoned family member. She's seen as uncontrollable. She doesn't necessarily fit in. So she's just kind of pushed to the side by a lot. So, yeah, Silva also fits the role in the sense that he uses his charm to gain what he wants, as well as lying and putting up a false front. So, again, he is known as the controller of the family, and the reason for that role is it attributes to that malignant narcissism that we have discussed. That's really what it boils down to. That's the Gigiana of it all. Some examples of this behavior was first shown in the Hunter x Hunter episode 24 with his conversation with Killua. So, the whole discussion with him being in the big chair and like Killua kind of, the visuals are there if you look at episode 24. He had this conversation with Killua, right? Kind of being like, oh, don't betray your friends and all this other stuff, even though realistically that's probably what he would want Killua to do. Kind of just like lying a bit, but hey, So he appears wholesome, right? It's like, oh my God, he's encouraging, his kid to like, be friends with all these kinds of people. It's like, how could he be that kind of bad guy? That's the front. That's the false front that he's trying to play. And he fooled this poor kid, as well as the audience during this time. But I saw through that bullshit, because quite right after, he literally had like this evil speech, as well as like talking down and, being emotionally abusive to his wife. But hey, that's neither here nor there. But underneath all of that, speaking of what I was saying, it was only used to like gain that trust, to manipulate Killua. Again, manipulate Killua, and in a way, manipulated the audience into thinking he's a great dad. No, the fuck he's not. He's abusive as father. And I'm really shocked that not a lot of people talk about him in this way, when we should. We should. When they discuss, like, bad, like, anime dads and stuff, I'm shocked he's not on the list, because he should be. He should be. And you know what? We're starting this now. Put him on the list. Yeah. So, this could have started again with his first kid being exploited. Because his first kid, most first children are considered the experiment child. Because your parent is kind of learning how to be a parent for the first time. So, normally in a more so healthier family, this would kind of be like, they're a bit more overprotective for that child. They're kind of just going in with their family research and the parent research, being like, oh, what kind of diapers should I use? Or I should do this and I should do that for my first child. But when it comes to this family, no, it was kind of the opposite. Maybe in the beginning it started off that way. But then, especially, I believe, like after Killua was born, that's kind of where the exploitation started to seep in. It might have started off normal, somewhat, with like little elements of kind of that exploitative nature, but it really didn't start to form until like Killua was born, most likely. So, first kid, most likely exploited during his formative years, and that's due to taking advantage of the kindness and trust that kids just tend to have towards authority figures in general. So we have that going on. He also made the first kid, which is Illumi, out to be kind of Killua's scapegoat, right? So kind of just like, oh, all your problems exist because of your brother, when in reality, and Killua discovers this as well, it's like, no, that's actually not the case. It's just like my family is inherently dysfunctional. But Killua doesn't realize that until like the election arc. Moving forward to say, made him out to be Killua's scapegoat. for something to kill with to fear, so that he kind of gets distracted from the fact that the person that he should be afraid of is really his dad. Yeah, and kind of the reason why their sibling abuse exists in the first place, kind of facilitating that, being like, oh, you have to discipline your brother in this way, and it's the best thing for this family, da-da-da-da-da. But at the same time, most of the blame's going towards you, because like we discussed earlier, you know, a lot of these things, it's like, I don't want him to see me as bad. It's like, I don't want, you know, him to see me as the worst parent in the world. I still have to have this sense of superiority, so you gotta look bad. And so does Caretaker, but, you know, it's neither here nor there. Point is, in addition to that, with this element, he used parentification towards Illumi, right? So, like, Illumi essentially is a parentified kid as well. And what that means is essentially he became Killua's third parent. This type of parentification in particular, there's involuntary parentification, which is the one we're dealing with, and not necessarily voluntary, it's accidental. So we have accidental parentification. A lot of immigrant families go through this thing, and it's not necessarily their fault per se as to why this particular type of parentification happens, right? Especially if you have someone that's kind of accommodating to a certain country that they're unaware of, or they're trying to, you know, maybe it's not an immigrant family, maybe it's a family that they need more financial support, so their parents would go after more jobs, but because of that, they don't really have the time to be at home as much for their children, so another child, most likely the oldest, has to step up the plate while, you know, their parents look for those finances to, you know, contribute to the family. So you have that, which is not intentional, right? I mean, to each their own on how you handle that particular type of parentification. I know I went through something similar to the first type that I've discussed, which is accidental parentification. And then you have involuntary or intentional parentification. And this kind of parentification, it's like they really don't need to be parentified. They have the resources to kind of just, you know, either hire a sitter or something like that, but they don't. And the reason why for this in particular is due to isolation. They want to isolate their kids further, right? And it's like closed off, you can only trust family kind of thing. This is really famous for like fundamentalist families. And I want you to look up the term quiverful, which is spelled Q-U-I-V-E-R-F-U-L-L. Once you figure out what that word is, and once you dive deep into that kind of research, you're really gonna know what in particular I'm talking about with this type of parentification, because it's really popular for those kinds of families. But yeah, it's the whole point is essentially just isolate their kids, and in their case, have their kids like only be educated toward this one thing. So again, so they can be enmeshed. That's the goal. It's essentially to attribute to enmeshment. So yeah, you have that going on, you know, in particular. And pushing that all towards the first kid. It sucks. It really does suck. My goodness, it really does suck. That's absolutely abysmal. But, you know. Man. Sorry, I'm just thinking about it, because it's like, it's absolutely abysmal, right? So, you have that going on. And the reason why it's like, I don't want to do this kind of work, this kind of domestic labor. It's put in quote unquote quotations, women's work, right? Kind of using an extreme form of this word that tends to be used a lot nowadays, especially weaponized incompetence. This is an extreme version of that, right? It's like you can do the job, but it's like, I'm gonna push that to the side and look like I actually can't. so that somebody else can do it for me. And in a way, I'm manipulating these people into thinking that, oh, I'm just not able to handle this kind of domestic work. But in this case, I'm doing it so that I can still be seen as superior. It's some fucked up shit. Why do the hard parts of raising a child and essentially having all the hard parts of a child, bearing and raising and stuff like that, when I can just give it to my wife and oldest child so that I can be seen as the fun parent and be absolved of all blame for what's wrong with my family? Why would I actually be involved in that when I could just, isolate myself and just be involved in kind of like the business aspects to my family? Like, I don't actually want to be involved in that kind of stuff because that kind of stuff is boring and it doesn't make me look good. And I know that's kind of a childish mindset, but in all honesty, that is the mindset that we're dealing with. It is not good for the people. It's not. This kind of thinking that he might have is, again, another indicator for his manipulative tendencies. He also made his youngest daughter a complete scapegoat. Alika, what great fun. That poor girl. I would give her a hug if I could. But yeah, made her the scapegoat, regarded her as less than human, so it kind of dehumanized her, which is sadly pretty common for scapegoats. That's kind of the particular type of abuse that they deal with. We'll discuss more about that, but just know, yeah, dehumanized her so that they fear and blame her for why this family isn't living to their full potential when it's all reality. It's kind of him as the main reason why your family's a mess and a half, because you won't let your family thrive in a healthy way. But sure, let's just blame your youngest daughter. I'm vindictive, but it's for a reason. People gotta know the truth. So, he does this by constantly referring to her as it. Fun. So in chapter 322, he shows more of his hypocritical nature and continues to scapegoat Alika by stating, have you forgotten how many people have died? No, that's just not good enough. Like, sir, you are forgetting the fact that your family's entire livelihood depends on murder. Like, this shouldn't really surprise you, but for some reason that cognitive dissonance is kind of just kicking in and kind of just being like, yeah, we kill people, but not like that. We kill people for a good reason. Like, we're better than that. And yeah, although his entire family's made up of murderers, he believes that he's somehow morally superior. He's not, but he likes to think that he is. It's a mess. It's a mess, truly. I just... Are you angry yet? You should be. Yeah. This is infuriating. So yeah, turning this back to Olivia again. This method for his scapegoating could consist of him, in the case of like Illumi's type of scapegoating with like Killua, there's a mixture of different forms of how that happened. And another method is triangulation was more so used for like Alika. We'll discuss that. But for Illumi in particular, this method of his type of scapegoating could consist of him being the reason why the children are misbehaving, being like, if you don't do such and such, then your, younger brother can't be like this. Not even just that. It's like your younger brother could like be greatly harmed. Like, what if your younger brother like dies and it's because you won't do what I say? Could have well been, very much so have well been the method as the type of, like scapegoating, a type of kind of blaming method that's particular to like caretakers within the family, which we will discuss that in a little bit. But before we do that, we kind of want to dive deep into like the next role that we are going to deal with, which is Caretaker, because considering that this is... Well, no. We're going to discuss Caretaker later. Continuing on with this, being a caretaker for Illumi means being a child's teacher, nurse, therapist, and so much more. I know a lot of people that can relate to this. Myself included. I ain't gonna lie to you. Myself included. Sure. older siblings can help guide their younger siblings, but it shouldn't be at the cost of prioritizing everybody else's needs over their own. And again, that's one of the issues with like parentification mainly, right? Is you tend to prioritize these little nibblings' lives over your own. You tend to forget that, hey, you are a human being too, right? And you need breaks. It goes beyond just that, but that's kind of the basics of it. But of course, you know, he doesn't mind stretching his oldest kid to the limit, Silva. He doesn't mind stretching out his oldest kid to the limit as long as he gets something out of it. So he doesn't care if he's mentally straining this poor kiddo. Does not care as long as he's gaining something out of it. And in this case, it's literally gaining this quote unquote perfect family, which in reality, as we see throughout the story, doesn't exist. Just keeps getting worse. Additionally, he appears to have this sort of give and take dynamic with Illumi, but it is so fucking unhealthy. Like, it's like less so give and take and more so like, I'm gonna constantly take from you constantly giving me something, which unfortunately is kind of how a lot of relationships with someone who has malignant narcissism tends to work. So oh, we out here in the trenches. But you know, yeah, so unhealthy. Yeah, it's Silva taking, but offers little to nothing in return. And kind of on top of that, being like, you should be grateful that I'm just taking so much from you, you know, because I am your dad and I put you here. When it's like, in all honesty, sir, you didn't have to do all that. But hey, we out here. Silva, everybody. You pissed off yet? You're getting close. Well, let's keep going. So yeah, whatever he provides, such as like quote unquote love and affection, it's conditional love and affection, by the way. So yeah, that's fun. Conditional love, everyone. Don't we love that? We don't? I know we don't. Yeah, it's merely what the child he's raising needs to like survive. Because kids need a healthy form of love and affection from their caregivers. And we kind of discussed that if you don't do that, they can have like insecure attachments back in my attachments episode. But hey, you know, we're out here. So despite the fact that the majority of the family feared Alika, you know, the majority of the family, not just Illumi, feared Alika, but later on, especially in the election arc, he's seen as the crazy one, even though literally everybody in this bitch is scared of Alika. So what makes him any different? Why is, you know, this person in particular in this family viewed as crazy when in actuality y'all are all acting disrespectful towards this child? But hey, that's neither here nor there. Yeah, especially in chapter 326 for Illumi because of his fear of Alika. So that's fun. His method, despite being extreme, you know, Illumi's method, the reason why that method even existed in the first place was kind of just serving the purpose of solving this quote-unquote problem that Silva had, you know? Because we only know the small portions, and scapegoating goes all the way up to, like, constantly complaining about the scapegoat. And it's just like, well, if you're constantly complaining about this so-called scapegoat, and again, being kind of this caretaker, another term for caretaker is enabler, and it's like, well, me is the caretaker of this family, right? Illumi's mindset is like, me is the caretaker of this family, the hero of the family. I gotta, you know, make sure that everybody's needs are met, and you keep constantly complaining about this particular person. Why don't we just get rid of them? You know? But it's like, no, baby, he's complaining because he's a bitch and a half. But hey, that's neither here nor there. So yeah, idea of making Alika the root of their problems, which then gave Illumi the motivation to kill her. It wasn't until later in the election arc that Illumi had the idea of wanting to control Alika instead of maybe, you know, killing her. So in a way, basically appeasing and kind of wanting to fit her into that enmeshment type of family that they have going on. It's like, you can fit in, you know, as long as you stick to the rules that everybody else is attributed to, and I can kind of, catch you up on what the rules of this particular family are, and as long as you follow these rules, you'll be fine. But, something I don't think even this oldest kid knows is you can't really attribute to a narcissistic family's rules, because you can never really appease someone with NPD, right? It's this constant, narcissistic supply that can never be full. And there's a good way that someone who did have NPD that described it, which is essentially you have a bucket with a hole at the bottom. It's never going to be full. Never. But hey, let's keep going. Possibly as a way for her to, again, kind of fit in to this family, kind of just fit into this enmeshment that they got going on. It's like, as long as I could be your manager. It's like, I can show you the way, It's like, but it's like, no, baby, that ain't gonna work, because she's already the scapegoat, and it's probably gonna be worse because of that. It's not gonna be good for the people. Yeah, the damage, however, like I've discussed, has already been done. As long as Silva sees his family as something to be controlled rather than something to truly understand and grow with, right? So instead of having this sense of interdependence, it's kind of just like this overbearing sense of control. Interdependence would incite that, hey, you are your own individual and we're still connected to each other, but I don't have to control you, because at the end of the day, I know that you just love me. I know that you will support me and be here for me, right? But you have a life of your own. In this particular family, it's kind of the opposite of that. So, yeah, that's good and well and done. Another example is how he reacts when his child leaves without his authority, which also irritates him. He reacts by completely controlling them. Silver's reaction to all of that is by, very much so like the methods that are used in a cult or an alternative school like Elan. And also look up the school Elan. There's an entire documentary about it. It is scary. But yeah, that's just kind of the tactics that he tends to use. So, hypothetically speaking, it is also reasonable to assume that Silva kind of controls his sexual relations with other people. Because this is the Lumi's character analysis, it's also good to assume that he tends to maybe control Lumi's life beyond the needs of what a parent should. So kind of just overstepping that boundary of also controlling, his children's dating lives with other people in a manner akin to many other fathers with the extremely misogynistic ideals. Especially I use the theory of Olumi being a female at birth, but even with a male at birth, this could still work. I feel like either way, it's inappropriate. So, to each their own with the perception of Olumi's character in particular. Main point is, he is one of those wealthy fathers who will use his child for a trade. Which he technically already does, but hey. That's not here nor there. This combined with the prospect of selling his oldest child maybe to the highest bidder. This is getting really dark. This leads to an unhealthy interpersonal relationship with others regarding Olumi's sexuality. In essence, kind of viewing Olumi as property, which he does quite often. Silva may believe that if this is not advantageous to the family, it has no purpose. Right, so I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of shocked that the first kid is not in some form of an arranged marriage, because that just seems to be the route that it was taking, but I guess everything else kind of distracted him from that, so it's kind of a good thing that it didn't happen, and we're glad that the first kid had an engagement that was outside of the family's choices, because if that was not the case, this would have been a mess and a half. But hey, one final example to this entire thing is the needle that was kind of placed in Akila's head, which was revealed in chapter 324 to be an order by Silva to be given to Illumi, right? That was the order and command that he gave to Illumi to basically place a needle in Akila's head. Fun. So overall, what we have with Silva in its entirety. The main issue with Silva and Illumi's relationship, because this is Illumi's character analysis, is a caregiver attempting to appease a narcissist. See, here's the thing about narcissists, right? Or anybody with NPD. First of all, you can't fix that. You're not a professional therapist. For anybody, in real life listening to this, don't even try it. It's a beast to deal with. Another thing about, narcissists, anyone who has strong narcissistic tendencies / NPD in general, is that appealing to their wants only results in them sucking you dry if you don't choose to heal away from them, right? Or if they don't choose to heal themselves, which is extremely hard for this kind of disorder, they're just gonna suck you dry and further exploit you. That kind of is the unfortunate part about this disorder. They will attempt to absorb your love and vulnerability into their bottomless pit of insecurities, or as I discussed before, that kind of empty bucket kind of thing that's going on. But this only scratches the surface of how tainted this father-child dynamic typically is. So yeah, that's kind of just all of relativities to the family role that Silva has and how that, contributes to Illumi's relationship with Silva, right? Kind of that family dynamic that's going on between father and child. So fun for the whole family. Yeah. So the next role that we are going to talk about and discuss when it comes to the family and kind of how that affects Illumi's character, because this is Illumi's character analysis, is we are going to discuss his mom. This is kind of my favorite part a little bit. We're going to discuss his mama next after the break. See y'all in a minute. All right, everybody, and welcome back once again. So the next role that we are going to be talking about is with, of course, the matriarch of the family, and that is Kikyo. Now, Kikyo is given the secondary role of the chief enabler. Now, this role supports the family's controller by downplaying the problems that exist there as a result of the controller's behavior, to get the family system to comply with the demands of the main contributor. They also use manipulation and other forms of control, with Kikyo most likely being the teen immigrant parent that she was, with her being a parent at the assumed age of 18 years old. Her life comes with multiple sacrifices, which includes aligning with the rules of the Zoldyck family. To keep her children in line with the rules, she employs a combination of psychological and physical abuse. One method is the dungeon room, which is most likely used for corporal punishment if the children disobey their parents. The use of corporal punishment adds on to the normalization of violence within the Zoldyck household. Other methods that she used for her dangerous parenting include high surveillance of her children, as first shown in the episode 24 of Hunter x Hunter, when she was shown to be hiding behind a tree when watching Killua interact with Canary during a flashback, for which she gave Canary a nonverbal cue to not interact with her son in a platonic manner, as well as watching Killua's friends, whom she sees as potential threats to her home. Though she formally introduces herself to Killua's friends, this is only to keep them from thinking there's anything wrong with Killua in the first place. So this alludes to the harmful practice of isolating kids from outside influences. By using this technique, abusive parents can more easily keep their kids under control and convince them that their treatment is normal. As was previously mentioned, Illumi has experienced some of these effects of this method as well, being the oldest kid. I mean, obviously. If Kikyo feels she is, I guess, put it to better words, losing what little control she has, because she doesn't have as much control as Silva, and we'll discuss that more right now, but yeah, using what little control she does have, she panics. So her emotional immaturity, along with her rapidly changing moods, is a recipe for another type of parentification for Illumi. This particular type of parentification is known as reverse parentification, where instead of having, you know, this kid being the third parent, now you also have this kid kind of taking on the parental role for the parent, kind of in this weird way being the parent's parent. That's why I said it's crazy. It's basically a role reversal, right? For essentially this oldest child, most likely having to calm his mother down from like being erratic. This kind of role reversal between a child and an adult would allow for the child development, such as like the normalcy of like codependency and fawning. It's very unhealthy. That's what you need to know about it. This was shown in the Hunter exam arc as the demand to retrieve Killua was most likely given by Kikyo in the middle of her screaming fits, which she does tend to have within the series. The only child who may be aware of Kikyo's past, either partially or completely, is the oldest, so Illumi would know more so about Kikyo's past than maybe any other kid. And Killua stated in a flashback that he was unaware of Meteor City's existence. So, again, she tends to hide a lot about her past from the rest of her kids. And the only kid who might be aware at all is probably the first one. So, hiding her past is another way for Kikyo to maintain the family image of perfection, because she doesn't necessarily come from this glamorous background, to put it simply. And again, it's no fault to her. I'm not disparaging that. I'm simply stating what it is. One of the final things that Kikyo does is enabling, is her celebrating when her children are shown to be cold and abrasive in nature, as shown first for the Zoldyck Family arc. And when Killua gave her an icy stare and a threat towards her, which is seen as a positive for this particular family, especially for Killua to grow into a proper assassin, right? So kind of attributing to that kind of behavior due to the fact that, again, everyone has to be this perfect assassin. So as long as you're fitting into this box, that's great. So yeah, Illumi, on the other hand, might be expected to be somewhat distant, while at the same time also taking care of his siblings, which calls for some psychological manipulation on his part, right? If the expectations are not met, then scapegoating specifically for a caretaker might be used in order to keep Illumi in line. Though it is okay for Illumi as an older sibling to be caring and protective towards their younger siblings, as well as helping out their parents on occasion, it shouldn't overwhelm to the point of mentally breaking down. So overall, Kikyo's enabling and helping out her husband's narcissistic demands comes at the cost of the wellness of her children. So in order for Illumi and his mother to get along, this entails creating an unhealthy relationship, as we know. Although some of her actions towards her kids are understandable, in the end, overprotection, psychological abuse, and physical abuse leads to damaged individuals who now need intensive therapeutic intervention, to put it simply. So I did it in a more simplified manner because we don't really see Kikyo as much. So unfortunately, I don't have as much evidence for her. But yeah, that's essentially what it boils down to being like the chief enabler, right? Kind of contributing to the household's issues and kind of enabling the narcissistic supply of the controller of the family. So the next role that we're actually going to discuss right now is known as the mascot. Right, seems like such a fun, cute name. It's not. None of these are fun roles to be in. Next role is the scapegoat. It's going to belong to the second child. So this person is seen as the quote-unquote comic relief of the family and the immature member of the family. And this role is, of course, given to Miliki, which is the second child to the Zoldyck family. Now, this tech-savvy Zoldyck household member is also Illumi's first sibling, and despite being a tech genius, he's never really taken as serious within their house. I mean, one may think, how come, having such technological skills was pretty useful? And don't get me wrong, it is quite useful. And one would think that, being technologically savvy is a pretty good thing. Well, that's a great skill to have. Well, I mean, this skill has helped their family business grow, like, probably tenfold with the help of, like, technological advancements. Sure, there seems to be an issue as to why it's not as valued, and it mainly has to deal with what the family values, which is on the field type of job. So more so of that, like, physical assassination labor rather than other types of, assassinations. Yeah, so this particular type is not as valued as, like, just on the field type of jobs. So since Milicky is not an on-field assassin, he's considered quote unquote lazy. I don't think he's lazy, but you know how it is. One prominent example is his interactions with Killua. This first appeared in the Hunter x Hunter Season 1, Episode 24 episode. And this episode features Killua making fun of Milicky while he assisted in administering Killua's punishment, which, to be fair, it was a tense situation in general. But this was supposed to be taken as, like, sardonic banter. At first, it kind of was, just kind of sibling but sardonic banter towards one another. And that kind of shifted when Milicky suggested that their mother, like, hurt, like, Killua's friends. And, that went from sardonic to not anymore. It was just full on not playing these games anymore. So as the episode progresses, the household elders disregard, like, Killua's punishment completely because, again, him being the golden child, and lets him go. And speaking of which, Milicky then claims that Killua is spoiled as a result of this minor instance of favoritism that we see. So we see a little little moment of that favoritism that tends to apply to the golden child. So insinuating that if any of the other kids tried that shit that Killua did, they would not have had it as easy. So Killua tends to get, easier treatment, which, yes, he does. And for anyone who doesn't want to believe that, I mean, you can believe what you want, but the truth is there. He is the golden child. So it's not a good thing. We're going to discuss, don't worry, the trauma of being a golden child. Don't get me wrong. All these kids are in, again, dysfunctional family roles. None of them are healthy. So, after Killua is released, Milicky goes to speak to his grandfather about Killua's potential skills and flaws. So, the conversation, started off cordially, friendly, whatever. But then quickly turned sour when Milicky suggests that he is a better assassin, and he tries to further prove his point, kind of just being like, hey, I have great skills. I have skills that are important. And with his new weapon inventions, which are quickly dismissed and mocked. Because, again, mascot of the family. They're not taken as serious. To which his grandfather calls him an idiot for even thinking such an idea. So, another example of Milicky being dismissed as kind of comic relief to the family would be in chapter 69 of the Hunter x Hunter manga. So, in this chapter, Killua calls for Milicky's help to receive, like, the game Greed Island, which is a rare video game. And during this phone call, Killua kind of mocks Milicky's, like, obesity. So I'm gonna put it simply, listen, I love Killua down, but he was absolutely fat shaming in this particular instance. And anybody who says otherwise, I mean, like I said before, believe what you want. I'm just telling you the facts as how I see it. So yeah, calling him Piggy, it's not that cute of a nickname. And if you're going to use age as an excuse, I mean, you can, but I believe most 12-year-olds know what fat shaming is, so I don't know how much of an excuse that is, but hey, you know what? To each your own. Moving on. Whether or not this was done on purpose, it's another small glimpse of how his family regards him as a failure and a joke. So aside from that, the interaction was, just typical sibling banter. That aside, their banter was fine. It was normal. This is unfortunately not that common for these types of siblings. So it's actually, kind of a relief that for the most part, they interacted in a way that, most siblings would. It was mostly normal during that particular, time in both the chapter and that episode. So Killua even promises a copy of Greed Island for Milicky, so it's like it's all good, that joke aside. Later in the chapter, as Miliki kind of just searches for this game, he laments that he wishes Illumi was there to assist him. So going back to Illumi, because this is his character analysis, once again, kind of reaffirming Illumi's role as kind of a caretaker / hero within the family. Kind of just reaffirming that in smaller ways. So another issue that the family might have with Miliki, him being the mascot of the family, is though it is never addressed, it's his severe self-isolation, as he claims to have never left the room since he was 10. Not good. This, however, should not be considered like truly a failure on his part. If anyone's, again, really to blame, it's negligence on his parents' part, because your child hasn't left since the age of 10. For most parents, that's concerning. So, yeah. Remember how I said no forms of physical neglect? Maybe I lied, because that definitely sounds like neglect. Like, you know what? Maybe I just, overlooked that. But it's like, no, that should count as neglect, right? Anyways, one of the end results of being the family mascot is this overwhelming feeling of just kind of disappointment and shame, right? Along with having impaired problem-solving skills. So, though Miliki is not a traditional mascot in the sense that he doesn't intentionally try to create humor as often, I mean, the only example of him trying to kind of alleviate or lighten the mood would be during the election arc, in which he makes fun of Killua's potential behavior for Alka's situation. And along with disappointment and shame, he exhibits signs of immaturity throughout his appearances in the series. He gets a pass for being resentful about being stabbed by Killua, because I would be resentful too, the fuck. I get it. It's you were stabbed. You have the right to be resentful. Because that's a fairly normal reaction to that situation. And the thing about mascots is they're actually kind of one of the most self-aware family members when it comes to, dysfunctional family. Everybody has this form of cognitive dissonance, and don't get me wrong, they have this form of cognitive dissonance as well. Wow. But theirs is not as bad. They're still extremely self-aware. Extremely. So going back, aside from his immaturity is evident in the state of the room which he's in, which is unkempt and cluttered. So along with his behavior, which would be complaining profusely to his mother, and it doesn't help that Kagyo tends to enable this sense of immaturity, which, does not help him towards finding the typical independence that someone of his age would require, which teenager / young adult. Living with your parents is fine. That's not what I'm complaining about at all. Especially in this economy, bitch, I'm not complaining at all if you live with your parents. In this economy, for real, in this economy, it's honestly better. But the problem is that he rarely interacts with, anyone outside the house. Again, kind of this, isolation that he had since 10 years old. We're going to talk about that. Let's keep our foot on that, because that's not good. As a result, his social skills are probably a bit hampered. Again, the blame is squarely on his parents for not encouraging him to develop skills to avoid self-isolation, and for failing to seek treatment for any potential mental health issues that he might have, because I'm sure there's plenty. But yeah, that's just really the bread and butter of it all for the mascot child. We are going to discuss kind of the next role, which I know is everybody else's favorite because he's the deuterogonist of the series. And we gonna talk about it in a minute, which is the golden child. I might as well reveal it now. It's the golden child. So as we discussed, the golden child role easily goes to Killua. I mean, absolutely just easily goes to Killua. But we'll be back in a minute. So stay tuned for this quick break, and then we'll be right on back. everybody, welcome back. The next role that we're going to talk about, as I already revealed, is the Golden Child. We know this character very well. You know, he's literally the deuteragonist of this series. And for those of you that don't know what a deuteragonist is, it's the secondary main character. So not like the main character, which is gone in this particular arcs. Later arcs, it's more so the adult characters that we're focused on. But the arcs stopping at the election arc, it was focusing on the kids, right? This was their time to shine. So one of the kids that we, shone on is the Golden Child. And that's Killua. Yay. Everybody applaud. Okay. All right. So the third child of the Zoldyck household, as well as Illumi's second sibling. Now, a narcissistic parent prefers the Golden Child because they see that child as embodying all the qualities that they possess, all the positive qualities that they possess, I should say. So the narcissistic parent places the burden of living out their greatness on this child, and they would live vicariously through this child. So the Golden Child is also supposed to bring prestige to the family. It's a lot of pressure on a kid. I understand why he ran away. You're gonna learn more and more throughout this thing. It's like, yeah, I get why he would run. Bitch, me too. Due to his status as the family's hire, Killua also had this responsibility. So a position that was bestowed upon him from birth, the reasons which are unknown. However, there are some clues for, why parents in particular pick golden children and refers to like their child's physical traits. So I know not everybody talks about this in particular, but they could be a very well reason. Physical traits could be, a reason. It's not the main trait from what it looks like as to why hires are chosen, but it's a pretty good indicator, right? It increases your chances if you look like the past hire, from what I can see. If you don't, but there's nobody else that's as powerful and you're the next best thing, then it's like, oh, fine, we'll pick you. But you're not really bringing the image of what we perceive as a hire. So there's that. Yeah. Some golden children, they do get picked for their physical traits. In Killua's case, the similarity between his father's platinum blonde hair and blue eyes could be a reason. It's not the main reason, but it's one of them. Another reason could be the more prominent one, which was that Killua is a prodigy in assassination skills at a young age. So with this family placing such high skills and such high regard, as well as Silva seeing Killua as an extension of himself, and though he seemingly wants Killua to think otherwise with statements such as, while you're my son, the day you left, I finally realized that you're no mere extension of me. Again, that manipulation coming into play, that lying, right? It's like, no, he is an extension of him, unfortunately. Like, that's how Silva sees Killua, as a mini him. Let's just put the rumors to rest. He does not want Killua to truly being an individual. I don't know if people believe that, but I'm here to crush your spirit, crush your dreams, bring you to reality right now, right? Killua is essentially, in a lot of ways, all his kids, he sees them as puppets. It's dehumanizing, but that's how he sees them. But Killua especially, that's his mini him. Yeah. For only to find that this interaction, again, is manipulation for Killua, with these statements canceling that entire friendly interaction. So the truth is revealed. He says, don't worry, he'll be back. And he is, after all, my son. See, for Silva, he sees, quote-unquote, nurturing Killua as a means to an end. And if it means showing favoritism and isolating him from his siblings, and therefore creating unhealthy dynamics with his siblings, then so be it. Right? We got this really toxic mentality going on. It's not good for the people.
it's not looking good for the peeps. Moving on, we can also see that these unhealthy sibling dynamics, starting with Milky, who's envious of Killua, which is a common behavioral trait for the golden child's other siblings, right? Because you have this child that's literally being treated better than like every other sibling. It's like, hey, that's not fair, right? Favoritism is unhealthy. Like, you are supposed to love all your children equally, right? Not supposed to pick favorites amongst your kids. It's not right. It's not right. We see this with Milky stating, but Grandpa Zeno, he's not sorry, and claiming that the elders spoil him, which is true. Again, that's comes in part with being the golden child. He's given preferential treatment compared to his siblings. Now, again, because this is Illumi's character analysis, for Illumi and Killua's relationship, which led to a parentified relationship that we currently see within the series, Illumi's responsibility was to essentially raise Killua. A job that was supposed to be reserved only for the mom and dad of the family. But, you know, like I said before last time, with how Silva likes to do shit, he said no to that. And it's like, you know what? We're not gonna do that today. We're gonna do something that's a lot more, you know, unstable, because I want to isolate my family further. Good fun for the whole fam. It's not. This job, however, was done by Silva and Illumi instead. That's fun. No, it isn't. It's not good vibes at all. Continuing on, in the Hunter exam, statements such as, "That's how Dad and I molded you to be," right? That's what Illumi said. Revealed evidence of this particular role reversal and Pacific type of parentification. Once again, these kids are just going through it, man. Illumi raised and guided Killua, as well as helped him develop his craft as an assassin. But the relationship between the two currently seem fragmented. Their sibling relationship, it's not giving good vibes. They are not on good terms. No, they are not. Perhaps the responsibility that both children had imposed upon them, you know, which would result in a weird mix of seeing a sibling as one of the main caregivers rather than the additional older guide and friend that they're supposed to be seen as. So again, when it comes to parentification, it feels overbearing and overwhelming for a kid to essentially see that parentified child as kind of, you know, a sibling. It's hard to adjust to that. Again, like I discussed before, this tends to happen with either accidental parentification. I know I went through something a bit similar with my siblings. It can happen, you know, it's a lot. Or in this case, it's a lot worse, right? Because the only type of image that is shown was, you know, that kid seeing you as kind of this bossier figure, this weird, uncanny place, if you will. It's uncanny, right? Because it's like, you're not really my parent, but you're acting like you are, so I guess you are. It's confusing for a child, right? And again, like I said before, we all know who created this model in the goddamn first place. Oh, this shit is a mess, man. Truly, truly, truly. Lord have mercy on these kids. Anyways, we see somewhat of a healthy distance with Illumi at times, right? So it's not like overbearing and overconsumed with, like, you know, taking care of Killua as well as his other siblings. It's like there are some forms of separation on occasion, with Illumi stating, "Oh my god, I had no idea I'd find you here, taking the exam," which signifies that, you know, sometimes they separate on occasion. Yeah, it signifies the two somewhat being individualistic from each other. However, their mother demands of, like, checking up on Killua boils down to making sure that he doesn't rebel automatically, and reverses the potential cordial interaction, you know, that they could ever have as an older and younger sibling. So that's fun. Yeah, they really had the potential to have a normal sibling dynamic, but with the family that they're in, yeah, that was not happening. So in order for the demands of Kikyo to be met, Illumi then uses the tools of fear and manipulation in order to bring him back home. So, lovely. Yeah. Continuing on, we then go on to say, right, we just had to sit and think about it for a minute. But yeah, we go back to say the speech that was used to remind Killua that his purpose in life is to be an assassin. Illumi states that there's no fire in you, just darkness, as well as your only joy is in causing death, and even that is fleeting. So the speech that in chapter 36, it seems to be a mixture of recited propaganda from their parents, right? Because it started with them, kind of just teaching that to their children, the oldest kid, and then, the oldest kid again, kind of having that third parent role, passes that down to his siblings. So, all of that's going on, and that was mixed in with, projection from Illumi's part, because the vibes are not vibing. The projection appears to be how Illumi perceives relationships. So again, that fearful avoidance that we've been talking about, yeah, that applies in that speech too. The Illumi monologue, as I like to nickname it. So yeah, that happened. And we see parallels between, Killua and himself a little bit, stating, Gon is a novelty, a radiant presence, who's piqued your interest. Additionally, he said killing him would be the only thing that matters, because if you try to be friends with him, stuff like that. Given that his parents may have discouraged any form of, again, platonic or romantic relationships from forming by giving him that same speech as a kid, this may give us some insight into Illumi's perspective on relationships. So, because it starts with, again, the parents. That fearful avoidance, where it comes from, there's more evidence to that we talked about before, right? So, after that speech, when he learned that Killua already had formed a friendship with Gon, he then gives Killua a test by threatening he's going to kill his friend. We love this family. It's good vibes here. Yeah, threatens he's gonna kill Gon, and seeing how Killua would react to that to see if he would protect his friend first. Of course, Killua failed, as again Illumi had a needle command to not fight opponents stronger than Killua implanted, which, kind of prevented him from doing anything. By failing even thinking to protect his friend, Illumi then says, this test proves that you're just not qualified to make friends. This may appear to be at first unjustified cruelty, but hear me out. Remember from the earlier, in the passage, right, that one of Illumi's main purposes for Killua is to be a twisted sage in his life, if you will. Again, kind of guiding him as a dark mentor, if you will. Cruel as it may be, this has aided Killua in viewing his friendships in a different way with Gon and others, and at that moment he began the journey of self-discovery. So in a way it helped, kind of finding that more so independence and self-discovery that we see within the series. It was helpful, I guess. Hey, what works, Don't knock it till you try it. I don't recommend it, though. All jokes aside, I don't recommend it. So, with the golden child, there's also that moment in which they realize that their favoritism placed upon them, that was unwarranted, right? And that their relationship with their siblings was damaged due to the superficial beliefs of their parents, right? So you have this kid on this pedestal being like, oh, this kid is so much better than the rest of you guys, and da-da-da-da. That's isolating for that kid, because that kid could be like, I don't want to be better than my siblings. They're literally my siblings. What are we doing, right? It's, again, uncanny. It's uncomfortable. It's awkward. So yeah, for Killua in particular in this case, because we see it within the series, this all happened during the election arc. Kind of that awakening moment of, oh my fucking god. You know, this type of dysfunction, especially when it comes to me being the golden child. I'm realizing I'm the golden child. That's kind of the realization that was happening during the election arc. It was a lot of fun, a lot of vibes. During this arc, the relationship between Silva and Killua, you start to see some cracks. It's starting to dwindle. So as Killua asks for his dad if he can go ask Alka for help, his father, unbeknownst to him, says no. You know, which at first is unusual for Killua, because he had that favoritism. That, wait, I normally get my way. You normally treat me, quote unquote, better than the rest of my siblings. Even though he won't say that because he doesn't realize that until now, right? It's unusual for Killua. So he attempts to persuade him in a playful manner by saying, you can't stop me and walk with me, right? Because he still can't believe that his dad, like, said no. Because it's just like, you normally never say no to me. You normally give me, right, everything. You have permissive parenting. That's the type of parenting model I normally get from you versus everybody else, which is authoritarian parenting. His was more so permissive. So it's just like, this isn't normal. I haven't seen this authoritarian side, right? As well as, you know, there's no time for this dad because, you know, he still thinks he's joking. This kid's in for a rude awakening, right? So, however, his dad refuses, and then the friendly facade that I've been talking about, it starts to unravel, starts to crack. Silva, you know, starts to show his true colors to Killua, if you will, and that whole entire friendly face that he had, it starts to crumble, and he begins scapegoating Alka during this time. With statements such as no one can keep Alka in check, and, you know, questions condescendingly if you could, you know, ask her in a friendly manner for help. Now, it's not... It's not good vibes in this ocean. Yeah, it's questions in condescending manner if we could ask Alka for help. This is a piece into how Silva dehumanizes Alka. So, Killua sees this and shouts, I'm going to ask her as a brother, you know, because he's still like, just like, that's my sibling. What are we talking about? Why are we doing this, right? Because, like, why are we, you know, talking to her like, in this way? He doesn't realize, and it's only revealed later to him, like this self-realization. It's like, oh my god, Alka's the scapegoat. He doesn't realize that for now, right? He's only thinking, it's like, well, what could possibly be wrong? It's like, why are we doing this? Yeah, so I'm gonna ask her for help. Alka's family, not an appliance, you know? Why are we talking about her like this? And it is weird. Killua's in the right here. It is weird to talk about Alka in this way. But the scapegoating continues with Silva calling his daughter an entity and an it. It's not good vibes in this Oceania. As well as misgendering her. I mean, he already did with the it thing, but it goes further. It's not giving the clarity that we expect. So, this behavior is most likely taught to the other children, which causes them to fear Alka as well. This angers Killua, and it only gets worse. Yeah, this behavior keeps getting worse. As Silva continues to scapegoat Alka, put it simply, Killua eventually brings an ultimatum to Silva, after which his father agrees to bring Killua to Alka's room. So eventually, they come to, you know, a common ground. When they arrive at Alka's room, Silva attempts to regain control, because he lost control of that situation. It's like, if this kid had an ultimatum against me, it's like, this is his own children, but when it comes to, again, malignant narcissism, it don't give a fuck about that, man. It does not care. So, Feeling this need to regain control once again, while going over the rules for Alika, Killua engages in an inner monologue to which he questions whether Illumi was manipulating him to like stay away from Alika during this time, because he's unraveling more so the truth about his family. So it's just like, oh, what's happening? It's like, was my older sibling doing such and such, and like why? It's like, what's going on? You know, it's like kind of just discovering more and more about that. This is partially correct. He did. But he's overlooking the fact that the main reason as to why Illumi did that in the first place was, again, due to the commands of the family elders, especially on his father's part. But he'll know that later. He'll know. Killua starts to see more cracks behind his family's facade, particularly his father's facade, right? It's like, oh, he's not as great as a dad. Yeah, he's not. By Silva stating, like, again, not good enough. Have you forgotten how many people have died? At Killua's attempts to humanize Alika, which angers Killua, and Killua then points out the hypocrisy of such a statement by pointing out that the other family members have killed more people than her, seeing that he's losing control. Again, losing that control of Killua. Silva tries to lure Killua's trust back in order to gain control once again. Because again, it's about that control. He's losing it. It's not really good for malignant narcissism, because that sense of superiority, that sense of, you know, everything revolving around me, it's not happening anymore. I don't like it. That's the mindset that we're dealing with. Again, when you really think about it, it is a pretty childish mindset to have, but unfortunately that is what we're dealing with. So there's that. And throughout this arc, Illumi is attempting to keep his family safe from Killua's potentially lethal wish on Alika's part. So during this time, Illumi discusses his family's common theory, which is that Killua would sacrifice someone else in order to make the wish, and then sacrifice himself in order to balance things out, and then putting so many other people in danger. That's the theory that most of the family have. So that was the assumption of what Killua was going to do. He discussed alternative solutions with his coworker / future fiance in order to prevent a large number of people from dying. So this was the entire, election arc conversation that Illumi had, that we kind of discussed in the romantic aspects with Illumi. We kind of discussed that, right? This conversation he had with Hisoka in particular. So like during this conversation, differing thoughts arises between like Hisoka, which again is Illumi's co-worker / future fiance, and him when it comes to who would hypothetically die from Killua's wish first, right? So Illumi believed it would be the family first, which Hisoka believes it would be Killua's best friend, Gon. So like Illumi believes it's like, oh, my family, me, and the rest of my family is gonna pass away first from this wish, and then it's gonna be a whole lot of other people. But Hisoka believing, again, it's about close proximity, right? Who's mostly close with like Killua the majority of the time. It was Gon. So it's like, we assume due to that, it's gonna be Gon that's gonna die first, and then family. So after that, they discussed the last resort of, which is if Killua doesn't agree to an alternative, then they just kill Alika so that, essentially nobody dies. Recall that when we previously stated, Illumi was not entirely of sound mind, because again, mentally breaking, it's starting to crack mentally, during this time. So it was a lot of mess during the election arc. That's what you really need to know. It was a mess. The end of this arc in particular was during, Illumi's entire mental breakdown and the election arc. And during the end, it really just started cracking through, man. The siblings, after that, come to an eventual understanding. And, Illumi starts to show signs of, calming down. So, yeah, that all boils down to, kind of what goes around the golden child during this time. We know, especially, another example was everyone trying to appease to Killua in a way, right? All the maids and butlers kind of favoring him, especially Chabon, right? Kind of talking in a distasteful manner to, like, about his other siblings, and her talking positively about, like, Killua only. And to be honest, I'm gonna be so real. People are gonna get mad, but it's the truth. Only reason she was, like, not abrasive towards Alika was because of Killua. If it wasn't for Killua being like, hey, treat her with some goddamn respect, she would treat Alika the same way that everybody else in this family does. Because it's her job, She would literally treat Alika like trash if it wasn't for Killua stepping in. So, we got that. I have my issues with Chabon too, but we're not talking about her right now. So yeah, Illumi's overwhelming anxiety stems primarily from keeping Killua and the other siblings in line, possibly to avoid shame and consequences on his end. So if Killua fails to meet his parents' expectations, the blame's going to be placed on Illumi, and the consequences will follow. So as a result, the two's relationship appears to be this awkward conglomeration of siblings, with Illumi once again serving as parent number 3, right? Kind of going back to that main consequence of parentification. So the current solution is to repair the relationship through a separation due to the codependence that plagues it, right? So kind of separating to avoid that issue from getting any further, as well as reintroducing themselves to each other. Once they, like, go on their own journeys and heal and whatnot, they come back as new people, and they see each other as the individuals that they are, kind of seeing, like, each other's sides to the story, which is currently happening. So let's hope for the best, right? Because so far, I'm gonna be optimistic. I see good vibes that this is happening right now, and that, once the siblings come back together, because I feel like Silva's cooking up a plan, and the whole entire family, all of them are just kind of grouping together. So we gonna see what's gonna happen with that. But for now, that is essentially wrapping it up as to the Golden Child and how that, Golden Child role that Killua have as relationship as pertained to, like, Illumi and their sibling dynamic, and how that tends to correlate. So yeah, that is the Golden Child, everybody. The next role that we have discussed right after the Golden Child is one that we have referenced more than a few times at this point. So you have the next reference, which is the scapegoat, right? So the scapegoat, which is the 4th child in the family, Alika, love her down. That's my girl, but she is unfortunately the scapegoat of the family. This is Illumi's 3rd youngest siblings, whom he, I want to say despises, but it's more so fear rather than despises, and the fear and despise, kind of mixes in together. Feels contempt for. Let's just say that. The best analogy for their relationship would be if you watched Encanto, and you would see how, like, Peppa kind of interacts with the topic of Bruno. It's that kind of situation. So that gives you a good image of how, Illumi tends to act when discussing, like, Alika in general. Very much so similar to the behavior of how Peppa acted when discussing Bruno. It was a sensitive topic. So both Illumi and Peppa saw their family scapegoats, which in Peppa's case was Bruno, and Illumi's case was Alika, as the primary reason for their family's dysfunction. These scapegoats are viewed as a preconceived notion of their mental anguish. For Illumi, the reason is that Alika's abilities come from this gaseous life form. It's called I, right? So because of that creature's abilities, it comes with casualties, and she has these powers which are so weird and different from everybody else in the family, and it caused a lot of casualties, right? This has resulted in a great fear of Alika from Illumi and other family members. This life form appears to function in a manner that's very similar to a Hinagami, which is a spirit that appears to be a commentary on human desire and greed. So, to put it simply, eye victims are often squashed to death, which is obviously unappealing, right? It's not fun vibes. Alika, on the other hand, is later revealed to be a relatively kind-hearted kid with godlike abilities. She did not ask for these powers. These powers are just, bestowed upon her. It's, honestly, if you watch the movie Hereditary, it kind of gives that kind of vibe of being possessed by this supernatural creature and kind of having the powers that follow that. Obviously Hereditary handles it way different, but if you want to essentially have a good image of what that looks like, that's kind of what you're, dealing with. It's horror movie vibes in a way. So she doesn't intend to kill people. It's just the cost of her powers. Oh, there we go. Scapegoats in a dysfunctional family, they typically point the finger at the dysfunction, which is a literal nightmare for a family trying to live up to the unrealistic expectations of perfectionism. So the scapegoats normally tend to reveal in real life throughout their behavior, but in this case, not necessarily behavior in other ways, but typically, scapegoats reveal the dysfunction within the family with their behavior. Because they're the ones that are sadly the most abused within these kinds of families. Because again, all the blame, all the nonsense is being placed on them. The biggest fault appears to be tracing those affected by Alika back to them in this particular family's case, as well as discovering that they may have desires other than monetary homicide and that being deadly and all that. It's just, they don't like that. They don't like revealing, undiscovered truths about themselves, so they would keep Alika just kind of locked up. So, while Illumi was attempting to determine whether the lost money from the airship is connected to Yeshuha, which is one of their butlers' newfound fortune, this wish request based on human needs was made apparent in chapter 322 of the story. So during this time, Killua also reveals to his parents what Alika was capable of, right? Kind of revealed what her powers were during this time. In other words, discovering Nanaka. Hi, Nanaka exists, right? This other entity that shares Alika's body. They started to see her as a potential threat due to how unpredictable those abilities were. That moment was probably the time they started making plans for her isolation from the world and her family. So this was really the time that they were really considering, we need to lock this kid up. She's gonna make us look bad. It sounds bad because it is bad. It's not good vibes. Not good vibes. Regardless, Illumi might have been a bit skeptical that Alika was truly a threat probably during this time. So I have set, and it depends, if you follow the 1999 anime model, the time is going to look different. I followed the modern day timeline, so do the math for the 1999 one. I'm doing it for the modern one. Teach your own. So I said, might have been a bit skeptical that Alika was truly a threat in approximately 2015. Again, we're using the modern timeline. Or in the 1999 timeline, the year 1992, right? So we're starting to see that in either 1992 or 2015, depending on which model you're using, when Illumi was approximately 19 years old and Alika was approximately 6. So before this debacle, the siblings seem aware of this ability, but just didn't consider it risky yet. So they were aware that Alika had Nanaka, but they just didn't really care as much, right? It was not really a place of concern for them. They didn't really treat her that different. You could still clearly see during this time they were interacting with her in a normal way. They were playing together. It was, you don't really see that, triangulation or anything like that until later. So, Killua showed little surprise when Nanaka appeared, and Miliki wished for a new computer and suggested that Alika killed a photographer with her abilities, but still played with her. It was just normal vibes. and included her in most of their activities that we saw in the little flashback. So, yeah, the fear didn't start kicking in till later. Illumi found it odd that his parents probably have informed her that, that Alka might pose a threat, because most of the children around here are viewed as potential threats by outsiders, right? Because they got powers that are deadly. All of them do. So it's like, okay, this one isn't that weird. Yet, an experiment was then carried out to determine whether Alka is as unpredictable as everybody claims, and how exactly this newly discovered ability of hers even functions in the first place. So, we have this experiment that was going on, and an experiment was conducted. So, the initial goal may have been to determine Alka's value to the family prior to, this is way prior, flashback prior, way back in the past. So, before all of the shit that happened during the election arc and during the I Called It Psychotic episode, again, I explored Illumi's mental health, but we'll do that later in a podcast if we can. All you need to know is that before shit went down during the election arc, there was probably an experiment that was first initiated, and that kind of created the reason for Alka's isolation in the first place. I mean, after all, later during the election arc, in the middle of, Killua and Illumi's interactions with each other, in their saner moments of his mental breakdown, put it simply, Illumi then tried to create a deal that he can manage and watch over Alka, so nothing seemingly severe can happen. At that time, we could see Illumi's ever so conflicting thoughts about Alka, between disregarding her as not being a part of the family and somehow seeing potential in her, and seeing her help her bring the family to greatness, right? Because that's the goal. Kind of bring this family to so-called perceived greatness that we've discussed before, right? It's she can contribute as long as we keep an eye on her and make sure that, her powers don't go out of whack. This was all combined with trying to save the family from the potential collateral damage, again, that Killua's wish might enact. So, as far as, Illumi's experiment, that might have first been initiated, right, kind of to discover what Alka could do, and he talked about this experiment with, Hisoka. It was discussed in little details, and I just basically organized all those details together. So, step one, using the scientific method, mind you. Step one, we have observation. So, this method, we're seeing exactly what Alka's powers were, and we're writing any new findings on this ability, right? We're going it through, Illumi's potential process with the scientific method. Step 2 is research. So, this seems to be limited to I. Was not mentioned in this research, however, this was writing the observation and connecting the dots to figure out the wish request ability, information that was later discussed with Ahsoka in this episode. So then we have hypothesis. This was considering the cause and effect of Alka's abilities, in which if you fail the demands 4 times, then the price must be paid with a life. We have experiment. This involved a butler as a test subject, and the butler was supposed to satisfy Alka's request. What would the results be if such a request was not met? Right? That was the counter question. So then we have data. The failed request resulted in the death of the butler by squishing. So, we answered that question. Also, it was later discovered that the wishes still cost lives, with Yeshua's wish causing 67 deaths and Miliki's causing 11. So we discovered this more with the data given. Right, then we modify it, so there were possible recalculations. Then we communicate the results. These results were given to the Zoldyck elders to figure out how to handle Alka next and her abilities. And the conclusion? With the results obtained, Alka was deemed a major threat, necessitating quarantine as well as new safety protocols if anyone was to interact with her at all. Such interactions are normally prohibited, though. So that was the result of the experiment. So following these experiments, Illumi was confirmed in his parents' belief that Alka should be regarded as less important in the family. But, he still has some regard for her humanity, because he has a few moments of correctly gendering Alika when not interacting with anyone outside of the family, and definitely not interacting with his parents. There are moments, right? It's like, there's moments. Even in the hypothetical situation where killing Alika would be a necessary evil, he told Ahsoka, just consider her, or in this case, him, because, again, misgendering was used, as a normal kid. But, the difference, I would say, like, even with this misgendering, it's safe to say that it was never used. So, even with that, it's like some form of humanity. Anyway, moving on. That's a discussion to be had way later. Or him, as we discussed, but the only reason is due to Ahsoka being an outsider. To be fair, Killua kind of does the same thing, in the sense of, like, misgendering Alika for the sake of protection. It is something that happens. It's not common, but it does happen, for, like, both of these individuals, and kind of this phenomenon that's going on, right, as far as, like, protection goes, especially as we're dealing with the type of parents that they have. We have all of that going on. So, in contrast to Silva and Kikyo's attitudes towards Alika, who refer to the child as it, they treat her as an otherworldly entity rather than their child. So, another factor in Illumi's fears of Alika, while still seeing potential in her, is the nickname Alika receives from Illumi in the first place, which is a Shishiki Warshiki. Warashiki. I don't speak Japanese. I'm so sorry if I fuck it up. Essentially, it is a Shinto spirit that brings mischief and luck. With a nickname like that, it was probably an acknowledgement that while Alika brought death, she also brought advantages, and if she could polish her abilities, maybe she could be a great asset to her family. Such considerations, however, were absurd, as with Alika being the scapegoat. All they saw were negative aspects to her powers, so she was ostracized from the family. Yeah, that was not going to happen due to, what being a scapegoat entails. She has to be there as kind of like the blame for all the family issues to distract. Like, that's unfortunately her whole purpose to her family role. It's a mess and a half. It's not fair. It's not. But, that's the Gigiana. Yeah, so such considerations, they were crazy. And she was then ostracized from her whole family, erased from the records. It's hard to talk about a little bit, and treated similar to how, like, theater kids would treat Macbeth, as someone who shall not be named. So essentially, she was just erased from the family, in a way. It's like, we do not talk about her, we don't speak about her. See how I compared her to, like, Bruno? Now it's starting to make more sense. In the case with Bruno, again, we had the whole "we don't talk about Bruno." That entire song, which is basically just like, we don't talk about the scapegoat, because they're seen as the problem of the family. Same thing here, except it's not with music, obviously, and, I mean, both ways are just sad. And they, like, isolate her further. Versus Bruno, who was isolated by influence. Her is just, like, isolated by more so force. It's not good vibes for the Gigiana. Yeah, Alika experienced hardship as well as serving as the family scapegoat. I mean, naturally, it must have felt very isolating for her to have her family kind of blame her for her family's malfunction. The isolation of the scapegoat serves as a diversion from any other family members discovering the true source of the problem. So, this lonely feeling that she very much so might have developed, later down the line. And honestly, not even later down the line. She starts developing it, and we start seeing it throughout the election arc. It's sad shit. This lonely feeling came from her parents using different methods of manipulation and psychological abuse so that this role could continue. The following methods to what type of manipulation was mostly blame and triangulation. And triangulation is when a toxic person with, again, strong narcissistic traits would pit people against the victim. In this case, we have Silva literally pitting like the rest of the family against Alika. It's not good vibes in this Oceana. Which came from, again, her family just, in a way, ganging up on this poor kid and viewing her as a monster. So, because she was perceived as a monster, another less mentioned technique was anger projection. That was another technique that was used. And anger projection is the act of blaming any negative characteristics on the victim and acting as if it's their fault. She was emotionally neglected and kept under high surveillance in a locked room in a basement. Even though she was quote-unquote spoiled with, like, material things, that doesn't equal love, right? Her family did this to compensate for her neglect and fill it in with, like, materialism. So that's great. Killua in a flawed way, because it wasn't perfect, but he recognized that the abandonment and the psychological abuse she endured were for control purposes. Because of course it was. This one-of-a-kind familial role causes significant psychological harm, which includes internalizing shame and low self-esteem. This was especially evident in chapter 327 when Alika asked, "Would you all get along better without me?" See, this poor kid is kind of realizing, right, that she is the scapegoat of the family, and it seems like everybody's arguing about her, but it's like, baby, it's literally not your fault. They should be arguing about your dad's behavior, but that's not here nor there. It's hard to talk about. It really is sad when you think about it. And this was all because, again, their father decided to fucking panic about what to do with Alika, and because he's the quote-unquote controller, the rest of the family was doing anything to appease him, because, again, it's all about appeasing the narcissist. And this causes conflicting thoughts and off-screen arguments, because we heard, right, that's like, Louis and, dad, his dad, like, didn't get along with each other. It's like, gee, I wonder why. I wouldn't either, to be honest. Like, I'm not defending all of the oldest kids' actions, but at the same time, I get it. So, and Lumi, again, being the family hero, Caretaker, was freaking the fuck out in ways to, like, take care of the issue. So that's causing the dysfunction to the family. That problem appeared to be Alika, but it's not. The truth is that their father did not sit down and learn about his own children. In this case, this particular child that he doesn't understand. So instead of sitting down, processing, actually figuring out what to do in a safe way that doesn't, like, neglect this poor kiddo and doesn't abuse this poor kiddo emotionally, he did the exact fucking opposite, because of course he did. So the intriguing group of siblings was completed when Kalito, who appeared to be currently envious of Alika, joined them. So, we'll talk about Kalito in a minute, and he has the role of the lost kid. So after all of that, let's boil down what we said last time, right? It's Alika being essentially the scapegoat. And again, this is probably the hardest type of role to deal with a narcissistic family, because they deal with a severe amount of emotional abuse. Like, this shit is insane. Oh, it's sad to talk about. And honestly, yeah, it's just sad. We're going to talk about the last role after Alika, which is being the lost child. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So I'll see you guys soon. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. We just took somewhat of a break, and welcome back as we continue and kind of wrap up everything that we've been talking about, specifically with dysfunctional families and the family roles when it comes to the Zoldyck family. So let's wrap this up with the very last child, who in this case right, is Calato. So, the intriguing group of siblings that we've been following around was completed when Calato came into the picture, who appears to be currently envious of Alica. We're going to figure out why that's the case, right? So, Calato's the last kid, joined them in their bunch of siblings, right? But the question that we're going to go right on back to is, why is Calato jealous of Alica? Well, one might inquire that as the family's youngest sibling, he should receive all the love and attention, since normally the babies of the family, they tend to be the most spoiled. But in this family, as we discussed before, that's not necessarily the case. And it's the third child that's the most spoiled, being the golden child. Because remember, we are dealing with a dysfunctional family, so it's not going to work the way that a healthier family works. We're not dealing with the same dynamics that you would in a healthier family. So instead of the youngest child being kind of, oh, the baby of the family, look, the cutest one, all that kind of stuff that typically would happen. No. We get something a little worse. We get the lost child, right? That is the family role that Calato has. It's also known as the invisible child. Yeah, it's already starting off not too great. So this child appears to be estranged from the family. Oh, this is also not good vibes. None of these are good vibes, by the way. So, estranged from the family. What that means is they are distanced from the family, to put it simply. They seldom reveal their true emotions, and they work hard to maintain a low profile so that no one worries about them. Is it getting depressing yet? It should. This is depressing. This youngster appears unconcerned and may develop a follower mentality. This could lead to a fuck ton of identity issues, as well as engaging in risky behavior. And the main reason for that is ain't nobody paying attention to this child, so they'll look for that attention elsewhere. And we currently see that. We'll talk more about that, but the invisible child, ladies and gentlemen, let's get more into it. So, being the lost child is like being the ghost in your own family. Yeah. Nobody really knows you, though your presence is somewhat acknowledged. I mean, they kind of know you, but they don't know you like a family should. So you're just kind of there. It's so awkward to talk about. When we first see Calato, he is walking alongside his mother for the first time. Yeah, that we see him. So, for the time being, this appears to be normal. After all, what could possibly go wrong with this interaction? I mean, we see a mother walking around with, the youngest child. Again, he is the baby. I believe during the time when we first saw him, he was, 10. I couldn't really pinpoint the age, but I'd say between the ages of, 8 to 10 is when we first saw him. So he was a little baby. At least to me. It's I consider people that age, obviously young, but they little babies to me. It's okay. Point is, it's he was young during that time, so I don't think it was that weird for him to essentially follow around his mom. Plenty of kids at that age do that kind of thing. That's not really weird, but what is weird, and we'll dive into that, is that this interaction tend to highlight an underlying problem that is only hinted at, which is that being a lost child brings with it, again, that follower mentality. It brings with it other issues as well, such as Kikyo's treatment of Calato being akin to a child caring for a doll. So, in other words, Kikyo doesn't really interact with Calato in a normal mother-child sense, but more how children tend to handle their baby dolls. It's kind of more so that way. It's not good, because every time how children, once they're done playing with the baby doll, they would kind of just drop it to the ground and then pick it back up when it feels the need for attention or whatever the case may be again, or feels the need with playing with something else, right, to kind of appease their boredom. That's the kind of vibe we're getting. It's not good. It's not good vibes. Yeah, this also refers to, and please do not murder me, I don't know why they named it this. Blame the psychologists that gave it this term. Oh, don't kill me. The term is called emotional incest, and it's not what you think it is. It's not incest at all. It's also known as covert incest. It really is just an extreme version of emotional abuse. I don't know why it's named that. It's such a controversial name. I guess the reason why it's because it's an uncomfortable amount of closeness that a parent shouldn't really have with a kid. It's basically no boundaries when it comes to that parent-child relationship. Which, again, there's so many ways to say that. But, hey, that's the way the psychologist called it. Don't kill me. Again, we have covert incest, emotional incest, which is a type of emotional abuse in which parents treat their child the same way they would treat an adult friend / romantic partner. Now, I know what you're thinking. Isn't this parentification? Not exactly. It's a little different from parentification because you're not necessarily... I mean, it can be parentification, but it's not. And again, like I've explained before, it does not attribute to sexual abuse. It's not the same thing as like blatant incest, which is just sexual abuse against children that are your own or against other family members that are your own. It's not the same thing. It's emotional abuse that is essentially the adultification of a child. It's not great either, but again, instead of treating that child as if they are a parent, this time it's more like an adult friend. When they're not an adult friend, they are your kid. There's no sense of boundaries when it comes to that, right? / romantic partner. So in some cases and I guess this is why it's called emotional incest, sometimes depending on the adult, things get a little weird. And it's not exactly sexual, but it's looking close to that. Like, it's getting strange. But in this case, it's more like treated as an adult friend. Don't worry about the second half, which is / romantic partner. Because as far as I'm aware, I don't think that's what's happening. Luckily. It's like, oh, thank God. His family has its issues, but not that kind. I hope. It's like, please, let me be right. The parents anticipate that their child will meet their needs in the same way that another adult would, right? In this case, like an adult friend, you're consoling to your child about like adult issues that they really should have no concerns thinking about, but because you have nobody else to talk to, you talk to your child as if they are your adult friend. So this is a role reversal, once again, between a parent and a child in which an adult seeks emotional support from a child. So that's kind of the difference, right? Versus like with the parentification and that kind of role reversal, you are completely taking care of that parent. Like, you are basically doing the same thing to how a parent would treat their child, which is you're accommodating for all their needs. You're making sure that they're okay. But in this case, it's only like the emotional comfort side, not really much of anything else that would contribute to parentification. That's kind of the main difference. It's like parentification, you got all the emotional support and then some, right? Very similar to how, again, a parent would treat a child. In this case, it's like an adult friend. It's like an adult friend, you'll talk to them every now and again, but you're not really expecting them to fix all your problems. You just need someone to essentially console you and kind of just like talk to you and, bring you comfort, which a child, I'm not going to lie to you, a child can do sometimes, but there's certain things that you just can't talk to kids about. Or you can't expect children to comfort you on because that's not their responsibility. So there's that. Now, this does not imply that if your parents, once again, as I talked about, occasionally ask for your assistance, you are affected by this issue, because the issue is the consistent dependence rather than the occasional reliance. So remember how I just keep on talking? It's really about that lack of boundaries that is the problem. So Kikyo's constant need to have Kabuto like following her around in the Zoldyck family arc, for the sake of emotional comfort and feeling the need that she has some form of control over at least one child's life, could be a small hint of this. So yeah. This interaction, however, will not be permanent, as Kabuto, like most of his other siblings, right, would choose to deviate from the household by joining the Phantom Troop, as shown later in the series. Kikyo isn't entirely to blame for this interaction, as again, things like emotional incest, the main reason why it developed is caused by a lack of healthy support systems with other adults. And again, remember how I said, like, you know, the kids are kind of isolated, right? So it tends to, like, isolate his family. It's not just the kids, man. His wife, too, in a way, as far as I'm aware. I don't think Kikyo has a lot of, like, other adult friends. It's not shown that she really has, like, any other adult friends, and maybe I'm wrong, but it really looks like she's also extremely isolated, right? It just doesn't seem like she has, like, a support from a lot of other people, not to mention that people literally just do not like her, put it simply. It's like, I'm trying to find the word for it, but honestly, there's no word for it in my head right now. There's maids, butlers, all that other kind of stuff. The servants don't like her. Her family doesn't like her. Or at the very least, they show us extreme amount of disdain for where she, like, came from and stuff like that. It's just, it's not looking good for the people. Yeah, like I said before, butlers, other workers in the house treat her with contempt, as well as mockery from her husband and her father-in-law. It appears that she can only rely on her children for emotional support. So it really just doesn't look like she has any type of friendly support from any other adults in her life, which, oh, it's so messy, y'all. It's so messy. But yeah, so she can only rely on her kids because there's no one else. It's really sad. This interaction is very unhealthy, and it could result in a high risk of anxiety, depression, issues in their own adult relationships, right? So Kabuto might have issues with all of that, as well as things like eating disorders, self-esteem issues, and perfectionism. So in addition to perfectionism, lost children have a tendency to equate their needs with selfishness and thus feel the need to accommodate themselves, as well as an inferiority complex, which could be hinted to as why he feels envious of Alika. Because even if it's negative attention, it's still attention. Like, people still, in a way, care about Alika. Not in a positive way, mind you, but they're at least paying attention to her. Meanwhile, Kabuto literally has to, like, fight for attention. And all these kids do, but when you're an invisible kid, it's kind of just like, I'm here, I exist, I want to be regarded as, like, special or someone to be considered, you know, applying resources for, but I'm literally the last option. Like, I'll give a very good example. So I don't know if everyone played, like, dodgeball, but some form of, like, games during, like, gym class, right? And you would have, okay, I pick this person and this person and this person to be on my team. The lost child is the last one that gets picked. Yeah, it's that kind of thing, right? When you're the last one that gets picked, it's basically like, am I not good enough? Am I the last one to get picked because nobody else wants me to be on their team, right? It just doesn't feel good. But that's what the lost child feels consistently. So, you know, that's a reason, again, why he feels possibly resentment towards Alika, with the addition of, like, Alika having, like, positive relationship with Killua, right? And Killua being the golden child, it'd be like, well, if this golden child that everybody else considers, like, worthy and high up there and having this pedestal, you know, talks to Alika as this sort of equal, and he doesn't talk to me that way, so that must equal to him, like, hating me. Which no child, especially a young child like this, should feel like that. I just feel so bad. I'm literally gonna cry. Oh, let's keep going.
Besides desiring some of the same admiration that Killua gives Alika, he might also feel tired of constantly minimizing himself for the sake of his family's comfort. Having the mindset that we already have one problematic child, which is Alika, so I need to be the least problematic. I mean, that shit can be really tiring to have, especially as a kid. You shouldn't feel like this. Oh my God. It is especially isolating for a 12-year-old child to constantly feel like their needs are being ignored in favor of their siblings. Apparently more interesting pursuits. So in this case, it's like you have all these siblings doing their own thing and they seem so much more interesting. You literally have this like golden child, they're doing whatever, right? They're out here. I mean, Killua was literally out here running away and shit, but everybody's like paying attention to that. But if they're not paying attention, running away, right? Even before all of that, it's like they're still paying attention to him, right? But if they're not doing that, they're paying attention to like Alika. Again, negative attention is still attention. They're paying attention, maybe not to Miliki as much, but on occasion, probably a little bit more than Kalito, just a little bit. But again, that neglect part that we will maybe go back on because it's like, that's still not good, right? So, but gain some form of attention due to his technological advancements. He's still considered like, a great asset. He's still like there, we'll pay attention to him sometimes, maybe not as much as like his other siblings, but he still gets some form of positive attention. And the first kid, obviously being like the most busy, kind of being like the caretaker of the family. And, it's kind of a thankless job, but at the same time, a lot of the resources for the first kid, because, when you're the first children, like I said before, you're the experiment child, right? So it's literally your parents learning how to be parents. So like, even before the whole sibling things, like you still got a lot more resources before then. And like the oldest child would typically get some sort of like freedom. It's not really freedom. It's more so just like some form of a say within the family. It's not much of a say, but it's a say, more so like the other kids, because it's like, I'm the oldest, I have to take care of you guys. So obviously my parents are going to trust me the most, right? Because I'm essentially a guide to the rest of my siblings. So a lot of the resources are also going to go to me to make sure that I accommodate for these little nibblings that I got around me. So even with that, it's still attention, right? Not to mention that if we're going to go a little step further, I'm not sure how much Kalito's like heard, right? I'm sure it's a lot, right? From like Killua running away. I'm not sure how much he's heard about like Illumi's personal life and stuff like that, as far as like relationships and stuff. But even with that, it's kind of like, wow, all my other siblings kind of have, put it simply, a life. I want that too. Shit, It's like, I want a life too, beyond just this, right? I want to define myself. And it seems like all my other siblings, one way or the other, have done that. And I'm just kind of here. Yeah. So, another thing to mention is that his motivation for joining the Phantom Troop. Let's talk about that. It was to become stronger in order to bring Killua home. That's the initial motive. But it was probably to impress Killua as well. The Phantom Troop welcomes him with seemingly open arms. There's no, resentment towards that. And he begins to learn a completely different dynamic from that of his families. We start to see him explore that throughout the series. So he's in a completely different group from his family. So, start to experience a bit more people. So yeah, speaking of family dynamics, another adult he tends to tag along with is, of course, the caretaker / hero of the family, which is Illumi. He tends to follow the oldest around, and the interaction between Kalito and Illumi seems to be one of the few healthy interactions once again between the younger sibling and an older sibling. It's like, we don't see these often, so we really got to cherish, right, when they do have healthy interactions with each other. Though Kalito tags along with Illumi on occasion, it doesn't appear to be a complete burden at all. The two help each other, right, when needed,
An example of this would be in the election arc when, after Lumi kills the 10 Dons, he then asks Kalito to act as a distraction so that he can quickly disguise himself as Ahsoka and switch places, right? So, like, Kalito was a distraction so that the plan could work sufficiently. With him, like, to avoid suspicion from the Phantom Troop when Ahsoka attempts to fight Krilla. So all of that, he was a part of their little plan. It was an adorable time. I'll admit that. So another instance is also in the Secession War arc when Illumi joins the Phantom Troop, most likely is to be a spy for his fiance. We will dive into that in a little bit. In fact, Kalito has no qualms about Illumi's sudden interest in the Phantom Troop, doesn't try to, like, snitch or rat him out, be like, hey, you know, he's not there with wholesome intentions. It's like, he's not doing that. It's like, this is my sibling. Shh, I ain't gonna say shit. I am not gonna say anything. I'll just, you know, take your word for it. It's like, fine. It's not like fine, like, fine. It's more like, okay, nothing bad's gonna happen, I'm sure. Maybe not like that, but something like that. Yeah, has no qualms about sudden interest in the Phantom Troop, even goes with Illumi to be questioned by the police about their involvement with the troop, right? Just kind of being involved in that kind of thing. So, yeah, their interactions with each other, I would say, is fairly healthy. Is it the healthiest? Maybe not the healthiest. Again, they didn't come from the most healthy of families, but compared to how most of these siblings interact with each other, it's pretty fair. It's pretty fair. So, a reason for this dynamic could be due to their similar temperaments as seemingly cold and nonchalant people, with a little touch of sadism towards other people's pain, just a little bit. The only difference is the reason for such behavior, with Illumi sadism being, first of all, rare. It doesn't come out as often. Contrary to popular belief, it does not come out as often. I've observed it, and it's just like, yeah, it's not as often as people think. But it does appear sometimes, and when it does, it's in the most extremist situations, and the extremist situations is normally to protect his family or for, like, obviously his job. If it's not those two things, which is either work or protecting his family, it ain't gonna appear that much. But with Kalito, it's a little bit more consistent, and this could be due to the underlying issue of insecurity and compensating for it. So at the moment, he feels every bit the prodigy that he is, right? He's finally feeling this sense of authority, this sense of, wow, I'm gaining control in a situation. I don't feel invisible. In the same way, Gon, right, is a character with somewhat of a similar objective, which I know what people are thinking. Hear me out. Continuously searching for new challenges to prove himself. Both of these kids, in different ways, they want to prove themselves, right? Gon is different, obviously. So we're going right back to Kalito. Sadism, however, does not replace the inferiority complex that Kalito most likely has, and isolation. The decision to join the Phantom Troop was Kalito's personal choice, right? Outside of the family's jurisdiction, because we know the rules that the Zoldyck family has is do not fuck with the Phantom Troop, essentially. It's like, don't even think about it. Most of these kids have rebelled against that rule already, so best believe. That was fun. Yeah, it's like they did not follow that rule. Anyways, this small act of rebellion is very similar to the path that most of the siblings have taken in their lives. The question is how that decision will affect the family, right? On one hand, he's still interacting with his siblings cordially. There's no animosity, maybe some animosity again, particularly with Killua, which, to be fair, I don't want to hate on this kid, right? Because Killua was a kid himself. He's just now learning that his family is, in fact, extremely dysfunctional, and it's due to generational trauma. That's a lot to place on a kid. That's too much to place on a kid. So I am trying to be as soft as possible. That being said, he's not the best sibling on the goddamn planet. I mean, with Alika, he's just now learning how to be kind of a healthier sibling, but, like, it's not his fault. Let's just say that. Again, he is the golden child. That tends to really isolate. And due to that, he really doesn't see his other siblings' perspectives at all. He was raised different. They all were raised in different ways. So it might be hard to kind of empathize with someone who just doesn't really have your experience, even though you lived in the same house. It's confusing. It really is. And it's beyond just obviously the order of children, like first oldest to youngest. It's like, it's beyond just that. Again, because we add on top of that the familial roles that they have. Now we are just in a completely different world. Like, what? It is nowhere near the same. So I get it, but at the same time, he's still not the best sibling on the planet, especially considering him treating the youngest sibling like the invisible child. But again, unfortunately, that also attributes to the familiar role of being the invisible child. All of this is so sad. I really hope they get it together, babe. I hope they do. But yeah, their loyalty towards each other is still present. He still cares about his family, right? Kaito. The true risk, on the other hand, is how his parents will react to not only his decision, but all of his siblings' choices. Because really, when we sit back and think about it, all of these kids, one way or the other, with the exception of physically Miliki, because he hasn't left the house, so technically he's the only one that didn't really rebel, versus the other kids where it's like, man, at this point, they really said, fuck the rules. They are not doing anything that tends to really align with the family's rules at all. We're gonna see how, because I'm pretty sure, like, Silva knows. I'm sure he's aware of what's happening with literally all his kids. But he's not going to spring it on them or weaponize it against them until, like, I don't know. We gonna have to wait and see for this man's plan. All we know is that it's not good vibes for these kiddos. So we gonna have to wait and see. But it's not looking good. So, those Illumi's family and experiences within his family are very significant pillars in his life. I mean, again, they're not the only thing around in which his life revolves around, even with the stringent restrictions that comes with being a Zoldyck family member. Illumi has found ways, again, small rebellions to get around them. And one of those few outcomes of these softer rebellions in the presence of a significant other. And we already talked about that, right? The whole him being engaged, which I'm sure also probably breaks a fuck ton of rules, especially with the whole do not have any outside relationships. Interesting. So overall, to put it in summary, we have discussed, like, the interpersonal relationships that Illumi has. We talked about both the romantic interpersonal relationship, that with his current engaged partner, which is Ahsoka. We talked about his family relationships, right? Those kind of family dynamics and the dysfunctional family dynamics that apply here. So we are going to move on right to the next series, which, after we discussed, like, kind of the more so relational aspects to Hisoka and Illumi's relationship, we're going to dive right into the domestic aspects. That's just kind of where we stopped at. If there's any other series, then I will announce those as well. But for now, this is the end of the dysfunctional family episode for the Zoldicks. I hope you guys enjoy and have a great day. I'll see y'all next time.